The sun rises over the Shanghai skyline, gleaming off the glass and steel towers of its financial district. This modern metropolis, a testament to wealth, ambition, and economic might, would have been unimaginable just 4 decades ago. In 1980, Shanghai was a city frozen in time, its colonial buildings crumbling, its economy stagnant. Today, it stands as perhaps the most visible symbol of what many call the economic miracle of our times. But the story behind this transformation isn't simply one of free markets triumphant. It's the story of state capitalism, a hybrid system that would forever change our understanding of how economies can develop and compete in the global arena. Imagine a system where government maintains significant control over economic levers while embracing market mechanisms and global trade. A system where state-owned enterprises compete aggressively in global markets, where 5-year plans exist alongside stock exchanges, and where party officials sit on corporate boards. This is state capitalism, and China has become its most successful practitioner, confounding decades of Western economic orthodoxy in the process. The journey begins in December 1978. After decades of political turmoil and economic devastation under Mao Zedong's radical policies, China stood at a crossroads. The third plenum of the 11th Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party convened in Beijing, and a diminutive but determined leader named Deng Xiaoping emerged as the architect of what would become China's economic revolution. In a dramatic turn away from Maoist doctrine, Deng famously declared, "It doesn't matter whether a cat is black or white, as long as it catches mice." With this pragmatic philosophy, China began its historic experiment with market reforms while maintaining the political monopoly of the Communist Party. But to understand how revolutionary this approach truly was, we need to step back and examine the theoretical foundations and historical context of state capitalism. The concept of state capitalism has deep historical roots. The term was used as early as the 1890s by German social democrats to describe policies where the state took on entrepreneurial functions. Vladimir Lenin later employed it to describe the transitional phase between capitalism and socialism. However, the modern understanding of state capitalism took shape during the Cold War, as various nations sought development paths that diverged from both Soviet-style central planning and Western laissez-faire capitalism. Economist Joseph Stiglitz, Nobel laureate and former chief economist at the World Bank, offers this perspective. The debate about development strategy has moved beyond the simplistic dichotomy between state and market. The question should not be about the size of the state, but about the functions of the state, what it does, and how well it does it. The theoretical framework for state capitalism combines elements of developmental state theory, which emphasizes strategic state intervention to foster economic growth, with selective market liberalization. The state acts not just as regulator, but as entrepreneur, investor, and strategic planner, while still utilizing market mechanisms to drive efficiency and innovation. China's interpretation of state capitalism began with Deng's reform and opening up policy. The first experiments were modest. Agricultural reform through the household responsibility system allowed farmers to sell surplus crops after meeting state quotas. In 1980, special economic zones were established in Shenzhen, Zhuhai, Shantou, and Xiamen, laboratories for market economics within the socialist system. The results were immediate and dramatic. Agricultural output soared as farmers responded to new incentives. Shenzhen, once a sleepy fishing village of 30,000 people adjacent to Hong Kong, transformed into a manufacturing powerhouse with millions of residents in just a decade. By 1984, reforms expanded to urban areas and state-owned enterprises. China began what economists would later call crossing the river by feeling the stones, a gradual experimental approach to economic reform. While maintaining ownership of strategic industries, banking, energy, telecommunications, defense, the state allowed competitive pressures and market incentives to reshape these sectors. October 1992 marked another watershed moment. At the 14th Party Congress, China officially adopted the socialist market economy as its goal. Deng Xiaoping, then 88 years old, embarked on his famous southern tour to special economic zones, reinstigating momentum for reforms that had slowed after the Tiananmen Square incident of 1989. In Shenzhen, standing before newly constructed skyscrapers where rice paddies had been just years before, Deng declared, "Development is the hard truth. If we do not reform, we will not be able to keep up with the rest of the world." The reforms accelerated. By the mid-1990s, under Premier Zhu Rongji, China began the painful but necessary restructuring of state-owned enterprises. The policy, known as Grasp the Large, Let Go of the Small, allowed smaller state firms to be privatized or closed while transforming larger ones into modern corporations, often with the state as majority shareholder. Millions of workers lost jobs in this transition, but a more efficient industrial base emerged. December 11, 2001, stands as another pivotal date. After 15 years of negotiations, China joined the World Trade Organization. This signaled China's full integration into the global economic system while maintaining its distinctive approach to capitalism. Premier Zhu Rongji, who had championed WTO entry, believed the competitive pressure would force further domestic reforms. He stated, "We will use the competition brought by foreign enterprises to promote the reform of state-owned enterprises." The state capitalist model produced staggering results. From 1978 to 2018, China's economy grew at an average annual rate of nearly 10%, the fastest sustained expansion by a major economy in history. More than 800 million people were lifted out of poverty. China became the world's manufacturing center and, by 2010, its second-largest economy. But what distinguishes Chinese state capitalism from other economic systems? Several key features stand out. First is the central role of state-owned enterprises. Unlike the inefficient dinosaurs of the Soviet era, China's state firms were remodeled to operate like modern corporations while serving national strategic goals. Companies like Sinopec in energy, China Mobile in telecommunications, and the Big Four state banks aren't just profit-seeking entities. They're instruments of state policy. As economic historian Arthur Kruber puts it, these firms operate as commercial entities but with strategic mandates. Their executives are evaluated both on financial performance and their contribution to national objectives. The second feature is strategic industrial policy. The Chinese state doesn't simply own companies, it actively shapes entire industries through subsidies, regulations, protected markets, and targeted investments. Take the story of Huawei, now a global telecommunications giant. While not state-owned, it benefited enormously from state procurement contracts, access to low-cost capital from state banks, and protection from foreign competition during its developmental years. China's electric vehicle industry provides another compelling example. In 2009, the government identified electric vehicles as a strategic industry where China could leapfrog Western competitors. Through subsidies to manufacturers and consumers, procurement requirements, and massive investments in charging infrastructure, China transformed itself from a minor player to the world's largest electric vehicle market and producer in just a decade. The third distinct feature is the Communist Party's direct role in economic governance. Party committees exist within both state and private companies, and executives of major firms, even private ones, understand that their business decisions must align with national priorities. Jack Ma, founder of Alibaba, found this out the hard way in October 2020. After publicly criticizing financial regulators at a Shanghai conference, the planned IPO of his fintech company Ant Group was suspended. Ma disappeared from public view for months, and Ant Group underwent forced restructuring. The message was clear. Even China's most successful entrepreneurs operate within boundaries set by the state. The fourth key element is the sophisticated management of capital flows and currency. China maintained strict capital controls even as it opened to trade and investment. This protected it from the financial contagion that devastated neighboring economies during the 1997 Asian financial crisis, and again during the 2008 global financial crisis. Former Premier Wen Jiabao expressed this strategic approach in 2009. "We have our own model of development, which combines a strong government with a market economy. This has been proven correct by China's rapid growth and its ability to withstand external shocks." China's state capitalism has evolved through distinct phases. The early years under Deng focused on agricultural reform and special economic zones. The 1990s saw painful but necessary restructuring of state industries. The 2000s brought WTO membership and global integration. The 2010s, particularly under President Xi Jinping, witnessed a renewed emphasis on the state sector and party control. Xi's approach, sometimes called State Capitalism 2.0, features more assertive industrial policies through initiatives like Made in China 2025, which targets 10 high-tech sectors including artificial intelligence, robotics, and advanced semiconductors for state support. It also includes greater scrutiny of private enterprises and entrepreneurs. At the 19th Party Congress in October 2017, Xi declared, "We will work to see that the market plays the decisive role in resource allocation, and the government plays its role better." This careful phrasing reveals the continuing balance between market and state that defines Chinese economic policy. The results speak for themselves. By 2021, China accounted for 18% of global GDP on a purchasing power parity basis, up from just 2% in 1980. It became the world's largest exporter in 2009 and the largest trading nation in 2013. Chinese companies like Huawei, Alibaba, and TikTok owner ByteDance became global powerhouses. But state capitalism has also produced significant challenges. Inefficient allocation of capital has led to excess capacity in industries like steel and cement. Debt levels have soared, particularly among local governments and state enterprises. Environmental degradation has reached crisis levels in many regions. And income inequality has grown dramatically, ironic for a system still officially described as socialist. China's model has influenced other developing nations, particularly in Africa and Asia. Vietnam has perhaps most closely followed China's playbook, maintaining Communist Party rule while liberalizing its economy, achieving annual growth rates of 6% over the past decade. Ethiopia, under Prime Minister Meles Zenawi, explicitly studied and adapted elements of China's approach. Russia, under Vladimir Putin, embraced a form of state capitalism centered on strategic control of energy resources. The global financial crisis of 2008 marked a turning point in perceptions of state capitalism. As Western financial systems teetered on collapse and required massive government bailouts, China's state-directed economy continued growing robustly. The Beijing Olympics that year symbolically announced China's arrival as a major power. Political scientist Francis Fukuyama, who once proclaimed the end of history with the triumph of liberal democracy and free markets, revised his assessment. The financial crisis revealed a weakness in the Western model and strengthened the state capitalism model. It's no longer clear that liberal democracy is obviously superior. The rise of Chinese state capitalism has profound implications for the global economic order. It challenges Western assumptions about the necessary relationship between economic and political liberalization. It questions orthodox economic prescriptions for development, and it has sparked intense debate about the proper role of the state in managing modern economies. Critics argue that state capitalism's success in China resulted from unique historical circumstances and that inefficiencies will eventually limit its effectiveness. They point to slowing growth rates in recent years and mounting debt as evidence the model is reaching its limits. Harvard economist Danny Roderick offers a nuanced view. China's experience suggests that there are multiple paths to economic development, and that the institutions that support growth need not replicate those of advanced Western economies. But all successful economies eventually need systems that constrain arbitrary power and ensure broad-based economic inclusion. As we look to the future, the competition between economic models intensifies. Under Xi Jinping, China has grown more assertive in promoting its development path as an alternative to Western models. The Belt and Road Initiative, launched in 2013, extends China's economic influence across continents while exporting elements of its approach to development. Meanwhile, Western democracies have begun to reconsider their own economic orthodoxies. Industrial policy, long taboo in American economic discourse, has returned through initiatives like the 2022 CHIPS and Science Act, which provides massive subsidies for domestic semiconductor production, a direct response to China's state-backed technological development. The story of state capitalism reminds us that economic systems are not static. They evolve in response to changing conditions and competitive pressures. China's approach represents not so much a rejection of markets as a different understanding of how markets and states can interact. As political economist Mark Blyth notes, in the West, we tend to see states and markets as opposing forces. The Chinese experience suggests they can be complementary when properly aligned toward developmental goals. The gleaming skylines of Shanghai, Shenzhen, and Beijing stand as monuments to what state capitalism has achieved. From rural poverty to global economic power in 4 decades, China's transformation represents one of history's most remarkable development stories. Yet the system continues to evolve as it confronts new challenges: demographic decline, middle-income traps, environmental limits, and global pushback. Whatever the future holds, China's experiment with state capitalism has permanently changed our understanding of economic development and the relationship between states and markets. It has rewritten assumptions about paths to prosperity and challenged the notion that there is a single best economic model for all nations. In doing so, it has truly changed the game.
We've got some amazing content coming your way. Subscribe now so you're first in line for fresh insights and all the good stuff you won't want to miss.